Good day to everyone. In conjunction with the Global Multidisciplinary Conference on Business, Education, Social Science and Technology 2022, I would like to share my research title, Drivers for Consuming Green Fast-Moving Consumer Goods in Malaysia, a Conceptual Framework. I will begin the presentation by introducing the research background followed by research motivation and objective, the significance of the study, a brief review of literature, research framework and hypothesis, methodology involved, and lastly the conclusion. As a brief background, the green buying behavior is anything but another wonder in marketing since the early 1990s when it gained considerable interest among scholars. Nonetheless, it stays an applicable zone of consumer research until the present time and result in a green gap. It is found that individuals generally hold a pro-environmental attitude to support ecological practices. However, such attitudes of an individual don't generally prompt environmentally friendly buying or consuming practices. Thus, the growth rate and market share differ vastly between countries for various green products in terms of economic value. In Malaysia, consumption and market growth remains a niche, which brings us to the motivation to carry out this study. The primary motivation to carry out this research is due to the green gap. The most consistent findings of previous studies have been the inconsistency between consumer claims and the actual behavior, the so-called intention behavior or green gap. The previous studies focused on examining the intention to purchase green goods as a proxy to consumption, resulting in the green gap or behavior gap. This study failed to embrace the consumption itself, where purchasing may come secondary to consumption decision. Additionally, it has been reported that 90% of models predict intention to buy ethically is not precisely reflecting the actual ethical behavior. This situation has profound implications as such product launches based on intention to purchase are more than likely to result in costly failures. Furthermore, numerous studies indicated that customers are interested in and frequently inclined toward green product variation in the territory of fast-moving consumer goods. Unfortunately, studies that intend to close the attitude-behavior gap, at least partially in this field, are inadequate. Responding to the green gap reported in the literature and by retailers, this study intends to examine the drivers identified with shoppers' consumption of green fast-moving consumer goods and not the purchasing drivers, and extend the theory of planned behavior by incorporating the temporal orientation dimension. Hence, our objective is divided into two as follows: to investigate the relationship between product-specific attitude, environmental attitude, subjective norm, perceived availability, and willingness to pay towards green fast-moving consumer goods consumption. To examine the moderating effect of the past, present, and future orientation on the relationship between product-specific attitude, environmental attitude, subjective norm, perceived availability, and willingness to pay towards green fast-moving consumer goods consumption. This is a brief review of the literature regarding the factors identified to influence the consumption of green fast-moving consumer goods. Interestingly, this research is among the earliest to operationalize attitudes as a bidimensional construct. Product-specific attitudes and environmental attitudes argue that environmental attitudes would not necessarily spill over to another environmentally friendly context as widely believed. Additionally, this research is also among the earliest study to identify and examine the temporal orientation construct, namely past, present, and future, which have been provides impact on people's behavior but are yet to be considered in the context of green, fast-moving consumer goods consumption. It is explained that how people reason about the past, present, and future may alter their behavior concerning the environment. This is relevant to investigating temporal orientation influence, since pro-environmental behavior entails temporal conflict. Based on the reasoning discussed, this is the developed conceptual model, and followed by the deduced hypothesis, which includes direct relationship and modulation effect. As for the methodology, the survey will be used to collect primary data from 150 individuals throughout Malaysia via purposive sampling by selecting those who consume organic food and not those who merely intend to buy green, fast-moving consumer goods to obtain realistic and valid result information. The partial least square structural equation modeling technique will be used to analyze the measurement model and structural relationship. Like any other research, the findings of this study are hoped to have several contributions to different stakeholders, adds new momentum to the growing literature in the green FMCG field, and paves the way for future research in approaching the problem in a more practical sense to bridge the green gap. Secondly, it assists marketers in growing the green fast-moving consumer goods FMCG market by building a targeted strategy to successfully interact with consumers to stimulate consumption, leading to more sales and a large market share. Lastly, once green FMCG is broadly adopted and a more extensive scope, this will contribute to the country's sustainable development by encouraging sustainable and clean manufacturing practices, recycling material, preserving soil fertility, reducing pesticide and chemical fertilizer use, and disposing of recyclable packaging. We hope you have enjoyed this presentation, and thank you.